as a basic formation knowledge. Okay, this is number one. Number two, I would like to mention the topic now, crisis of the fragility of democracy in the world from Plato, Aristo, and Sukarno. This is very interesting because Sukarno, that is one that is so-called Pancasila. Although the structure, that's not exactly the structure we are now following, because Sukarno started with humanitarianism, nationalism, democracy, as a social justice. Then we did one more, and the structure, the consensus, eventually decided that God must be one, and humanitarianism, nationalism, democracy, social justice, and even complete words, all centers, and even the pillar belongs to lines. And one pillar, the first pillar, initially was in one God, and also respected Sharia of Islam or Muslims. Eventually, these 7 words were created and replaced with 3 words in Bangla. And this is actually the 18th of August 1945. Signed, and this become the principle of Indonesian country. The question also is really true that these only 5 principles can be considered as an ideology compared to capitalism, which is a long explanation, and also, Das Kapital, volumes, big volumes, and the socialism supported many books, which is very possible to be considered as an ideology. But Pancasila was only one principle, and we see this an ideology without looking at the principle. Of course, Sukarno, explanation di bawah bendera dan at the same time there are so many interpretations. Sukarno has part of the same thing, and now even more fragmented interpretation. Okay, this is we are waiting for your explanation. It's very interesting because democracy is apparently fragile and just experience a crisis. I think the people are playing around. Yeah, this democracy, people is based on majority, and people can do things in order to become majority. People can do corruption, bribing, a lot of different approaches to persuade people to elect him. This is so-called democracy. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Yes, Ibu, want to add something?
Maybe Ibu wants to sit on the sofa.
The plug-in is my computer. Yeah. Thank you, Pak, for provoking ideas of thought for us, food of thought for us. This is actually we discuss every day in scholarship, right? Not only in this forum, but also in everyday scholarship. So Professor Adi has brought us how we can see the democracy from Islamic perspective and Pancasila. And now we would like to invite how democracy can be seen by the philosopher of Plato, Aristo, and Sukarno. The title of our discussion today is politics, in the era of fragility of democracy. Aristo.
So, I thank you for having me, and I appreciate it so much. When I got a Fulbright in 2012, I have to confess, I knew nothing other than that. And after I got here, I read Priscilla, and I said, that's Aristotle. I mean, that's right away. And so I still haven't really read all the books I need to read about their intellectual history and all that. So I'm going to give you, all I can give you is the connection I made when I read it, right? And so that means we know a lot more than I do, right? About the history of it, the context. I don't pretend to know. That's one thing. Foreigners use 5 books and they think they know, and I'll come back to an Indonesian, it's just kind of crazy. So I don't pretend to know. All I can give you is this, that you otherwise wouldn't get. And then we can have a conversation, right? That makes sense. This, so I call the Greek view ancient spiritual humanism. Okay? Spiritual in Greek means living for the sake of something greater than yourself. It can be justice, truth, beauty, preservation of the natural world. The worst sin is hubris, overstepping your bound. You need to know human beings' place in the universe. And the greatest sin is to try to play God. Overstep your bound. But the whole ethic, every part of the ethic is the meaning of being extreme. So vices are going to be extreme. Anyway, I'd be here all night if I, okay, stop, I'll just start with here. So the Greeks, the ancients emphasized character formation. And I know we can take this seriously. Like children speak with their parents till they're 4 years old. When I found that out, it was like wonderful. I have kids, and I'm even looking at these podcasts from trauma specialists, and they say, you know, that that's a really good way to make kids feel safe, right? Because they are vulnerable. But also you expect them to have character development, like praying and all this stuff. Ritual. Any religion has rituals, and the point of all rituals is to habituate children. So the habituation for the virtues is necessary to become responsible citizens, because you have to learn to care for each other, and then you really think about the wealth of the society as a whole, beyond your family and your friends, right? It's in your head what a fellow citizen needs, right? To make that transition as you get older. But you have to start out caring about other people in front of you, and then you can learn to care about people you don't know. So I say the modern Western Enlightenment world, it claimed that what people call morality is just what they were socially conditioned to believe, and there aren't any universal values. And so, like in the US, you can raise your kid any way you want. You can raise them to love guns and go hunting for fun. You can raise them to assume people are violent, and you deliberately have aggression toward your child so they learn to defend themselves. I mean, anything. And they can believe anything. And that is a problem. But character traits. So the claim is there aren't any universal values or character traits that citizens need to have a self-sustaining democracy. I think that's a problem. So the goal of this presentation, so I speak to you as a scholar, right? As scholars, you'll assume you're going to recognize either parts or all of this model as it's described in the text and the culture that you study, right? There should be analogies. The model is one response to the questions that every human being asks. what is human nature? What is our place in the universe? How are we supposed to live? What is the best life? Now, what's the nature of the universe? And that, some religions say God, and others like Hinduism say karma. This presentation gives my personal description of Aristotle's model of the natural human virtues. I became interested in the Greeks because of my undergraduate professor. If I had a different professor, I would have been interested in something else. So I don't obsess about the Greeks, right? I appreciate them, but it's only an accident that I happen to study them. I don't think they're the only way or the best way necessarily, just a tradition that I know best. And so I'll present it to you for discussion. Okay, so Aristotle claims the virtues and their corresponding vices are connected to ways of life that naturally lead either to human flourishing, active use of all of our natural capacities for good or evil throughout our lives, leading to maximizing the flourishing of others and avoiding unnecessary suffering for ourselves and each other. Aristotle's model has been used and abused for 2,500 years. It was applied during the colonial era to justify the natural intellectual superiority and the wisdom of Westerners, right? That justifies that we should oppress you because you didn't have it, right? So this is a very difficult model to achieve, but it's a lie to think that only Westerners could achieve it. That was the way. So I admit that. So I say interpretation is important, but there's a reality that's being interpreted. And because there is that underlying reality, how you interpret is very powerful because the reality is there. Okay? Okay. So, all right, the goal is the exercise of virtue. Yes, begin with children. Children need role models. And the first most important aspect of education is to take pleasure in the right thing. So they love being self-controlled. They love being gentle, right? It isn't that because they're told, right? Because they'll be spanked if they don't. They do it because they want to. They want to. The adults around them want to. They take pleasure. That's internal. Okay. There are no boundaries. There's no one rule of principle. So in the modern world, you have utility principles, there's hands-on. They're not how do we people live. They actually live their lives in the process. They exercise without even realizing a lot of times. We go through life figuring out how to make decisions, and we're always thinking about what are the options, what's best, and why we do this all the time. And this theory just tells you what you already do. And then you have this inner dialogue with yourself, right? Thought is an inner dialogue goal with yourself, but it's very much affected by the dialogue you have with other people and by the kind of situations you get in. We are social and political by nature. This is a rejection of the Enlightenment radical vision, right? We are formed by, but not entirely. We also have the power of choice. So it's neither freedom in a vacuum, nor is it conditioning and determinism. It's a different point of view. Our relationships, they go way beyond what any legal system can structure in. There's a whole social network that's totally different from the legal system. And the important thing here is greed. He says greed is the political evil. It is the desire for more than your share of stuff that's limited. And it destroys societies. It destroys families. It destroys society, because if you foster greed, if you teach your kids to only be motivated by money, right? Then the rich will figure out how to game the system, and the rich will get richer, and the poor will get poorer, and you will have social instability. And nations will go to war for resources, right? Greed is the political evil. So there are many other virtues and vices. This is the worst for maintaining a stable society. Okay, the role of scholars and college professors in the education of students. So again, we have the Western view was that after World War II, the US became dominant. It focused on free enterprise, right? After the fall of the wall, supposedly socialism lost and capitalism won. But capitalism is becoming more and more dysfunctional, out of touch with people. And Aristotle's view, as a matter of fact, all of this socialism, it's all rhetoric, it's all political rhetoric. As a matter of fact, every single country in the world except North Korea has regulated capitalism, okay? And what we disagree on is what to regulate, how much to regulate, when to regulate, right? We're always doing that. See, the power of rhetoric is that this is what we actually do, but we don't call it that because socialism versus capitalism gets people votes, right? It's so bizarre, but don't be fooled, all right? So in the US right now, money has stuck to money, and we basically have an oligarchy. We do not have a democracy. The rich govern our system. They pay for all the political campaigns, and truly, right up front, after you're elected, they hold these retreats, and they tell the politicians what laws to make and what laws not to make. They go to every state, and every state about the same time introduces the same law. And so we are truly slaves to the 1%. So I do not think developing countries should want to imitate us, right? So, and it's still a matter of regulated capitalism, and you have to decide what do you want to regulate and what don't you want to regulate, and what is it that's killing the US, right? We ignore climate change, okay? The capitalists don't factor in the cost of destroying the environment. It's an externality. Wait, no, it's not an externality. It's our life, right? It's our. They don't factor in inequality. So if the gross domestic product goes up, yay, even if the 1% took 90% of it, they don't factor that in. People care, right? So the system is so game, just in the categories that they try to train you to look through, and it's not a free market. It's just another wave of colonialism, all right? And they're exploiting you. So at least I know this. It will end soon because it's starting to self-destruct. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I know it's not going to last much longer because everyone's going to catch on. And who knows? But anyway, so the alternative to the US view of freedom, right? China is one alternative, and they're marketing themselves as quality development, right? And that means we're going to build roads and bridges, but we're going to make deals with you. We're not going to make you slaves, and we're not going to exploit you, right? We're going to make deals with our win-win deals. Now, I don't know enough about the specifics, but I know that that's good advertising because they do that at home a lot better than we do, right? They have moved their people into the middle class. The only people in China that have the yachts and big houses are the Americans who come in, right? So, so right now China is calling itself just qualified development. And the United Nations had a charter that linked the socialism and capitalism. The first 21 articles are individual rights, and the last 6 are the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to education. The US Constitution does not have that at all. And so we've always had to fight for that stuff. But anyway, so China just says, we're totally consistent with the UN, right? Because they're as consistent with as many of those points as the US is, right? Because they just emphasize differently. And I also don't know if China is going to continue to be as repressive, or if it's going to be as repressive toward other people as it is toward its own people. And I doubt it, you know, because it's not in their interest. It's in their interest to make deals, right? Anyway, so I don't know for sure what's happening. Anyway, Panchasila is another third alternative because it unites the spiritual and the social contract, okay? So the social contract sets up this model that's neither capitalist nor socialist, and it also has a spiritual background, and I like that very much. All right, so let's see. Okay, so let's start with the virtues. They're instinctual drives. So the claim is that we all have these basic instinctual drives, pleasure and fear. The history of humankind is the history of trying to integrate those drives into culture so you moderate them. So pleasure in relation to hunger, obviously, we get hungry, right? And when we eat, it's really feels good. So that's going to drive us. We wouldn't survive if it weren't a very intense pleasure and a very intense pain, because you do a lot of stuff to get food. Okay, so Aristotle's, here's how the virtues work. Okay, hunger. You can eat too much or too little. You can eat the right kind of things in the right way at the right time, or you can eat the wrong thing, you know, at the wrong time or in the wrong way, or blah, blah, blah. It's really common sense. Okay. The goal is to eat the right amount for the right reason, in the right way, at the right time, and to take pleasure in doing that. Okay. Now, there's 5 your character relates in 5 different ways to each of these virtues. If you're self-indulgent, you don't even know that potato chips aren't good for you. You don't even know what healthy food is. Or you think being 100 pounds overweight is okay, right? That's self-indulgent. If you're morally weak, you know what's right, you don't want to do it, you don't do it, okay? If you're morally strong, you know what's right, you don't want to do it, you do it. But you're repressing your desires when you do it. If you're virtuous, you know what's right, you want to do it, you do it. And you can tell intuitively, somebody who's like that is going to have good body chemistry, right? They're not going to be at war with themselves, their body chemistry is going to be best. So that's just the basic intuition. That wisdom is this complete, you know, integrity. Okay. Now, how has the international food system been corrupted by greed? And I'm sure you all know a lot of this, but the desire for profits has led to colonialist exploitation of resources, the exploitation of colonized nations that provide colonizers, right? So what they do is they'll take your spices like the Dutch did, or they take your minerals now, they take stuff, they cut down your trees, and then they sell you back stuff, right? Packaged food, processed food. This is exactly what happened when Britain, you know, got India to grow tea and brought it back and made tea bags and sold it. I mean, we're still doing that. Every time you look at that little package, you know, package is selling and they're from America, you know, it's the same thing. Today in the US, on average, 1 ounce of food, 32 grams, has traveled 8,000 miles. Okay, and the waste of energy and the unnecessary foods, I mean, it is really, but it's creating this gross domestic product. Everybody has a job, right? Moving all this stuff all around, but it's, you know, we're destroying the earth in the process. So this is a problem. The other thing about the food system is that we like sweets because fruits evolved and they're sweet so that we would eat them, animals would eat them, digest the seed, walk somewhere else, drop it off, right? That's the background of why we like sweet. Well, then the corporations get a hold of that and they process sugar, right, and sell you, and white flour, white rice. They figure out exactly the body chemistry to make you truly addicted to it. There is neuromarketing, where you do all this neuroscience about dopamine and serotonin, and you literally make people addicted, because then you can make a lot of money. All right, so I mean, I used to speculate about this stuff, and now I find out, oh, here's the data, you know, they actually did it. Then there's salt and fat, because we used to work in the field, we needed salt and fat, we spread it, we don't need that anymore. So you get diabetes and you get heart disease. And so in the US, 75% of our healthcare costs are unnecessary, because people have diabetes, heart disease, totally unnatural. We have children who are obese, and they're obese their whole life. And it makes so much money. There's so many people. So you make people into commodities that you exploit for profit. We make our own like that. So that's where the greed, it's insufficiently regulated capitalism, right? You don't say capitalism is bad, you say it's not regulated enough, right? It's gotten too far. Okay. But that's a matter of, right? It's everybody makes particular decisions in particular situations. All I say is, this seems out of control to me. Right? And then you think about, my gosh, what can we do? Okay, then courage is another one. It's situations that are fearful, because we are vulnerable in many, many ways. And fear is the response, right? So courage is knowing how to feel fear, right? Not too much fear, not too little fear. But because we are vulnerable, and it's a very basic instinct, people can make a whole lot of money creating phobias, right? Getting you to fear things that aren't really fearful, right? So again, it can be easily exploited. But danger, pain, aging, death and war, and illness. Those are the physical fears. Again, in my country, a lot of money is spent triggering people's fear of death and then selling them all these things that will keep them alive just a little longer, right? Tons of money in those last couple of years, because they won't let their body die. Their body's trying to die. So a lot of people make money off of that. Then there's fears related to culture, because we are cultural creatures. That's the fear of not making it in the economic system, right? Not being able to provide for your family. Or the fear of social isolation, or losing status. And that's a big deal with the cultural creature, right? You have to get along in the society. Social isolation. You can be too afraid of losing your status, right? Or losing your job, or not afraid of enough. And a lot of people do things that they think are evil, or they'd rather not do, in order to keep their job, right? To provide for their family. So if you want a healthy society, you don't put people in situations where they have to compromise like that. You try to have a job where people can feel good about who they are and make a living. So if you're running a business, you really have a lot of power to either, let people have meaningful lives and make a living, or force them to do stuff they really don't like, because you have that control. They have to keep the job. So again, greed, if all you're motivated by is your own profit, you can really corrupt people who otherwise wouldn't want to do that. So it's I used to teach business ethics, and I really like teaching it, because it really is important. Nowadays, you should know, more and more wars are being driven by greed. I'm an American, okay? And the Iraq War, I know the background behind the Iraq War. I know Mr. Cheney's company, Halliburton, their stock went up 10 times after that war. I'm sorry to tell you. It's 20 years later and people are saying a lot of stuff, but they're not saying. they did it for oil and it worked. Like, people are saying it didn't work. It sure as heck did. Mr. Cheney has made billions, and I still wonder if he's still making billions, because still, when the country is unstable, our corporations go in there and get cheap oil in exchange for, protection. So I'm not sure, I haven't kept up with all of that, but I did really keep up with the origin. And of course, right now, there's stuff in Russia. And so we need to go green. We definitely are going to go green quickly. And so it will be a business opportunity. And 55 years ago, it was a business opportunity. We had all the technology. If America had gone green, we would have no wars in the Mideast. We would be control the market, but we didn't do that. It was really stupid, I think. But all right, these other countries are going to catch up. But right now, electric cars are not a solution because they require too much lithium, too many minerals, and there aren't that many in the world, and there will be more wars for these minerals. So we've got to find another way. But that's for your generation. They will definitely have to deal with it. I just want to tell you, I knew this 55 years ago. Anybody with the brain did, and here we are. Okay, so Panchasila, the ideology in it provides an alternative to either extreme, and it unifies the spiritual humanism culture with the social contract. So it unifies the economic system within the broader context, which is very Aristotelian. He thought the theory of the household economics is that if you want a democracy, you've got to teach your children to want to be middle class, to like being middle class, to not to want more than other people have, or less. And so you do work to get your kids, because kids will fix it if they don't have enough, or if they have too much, then their identity will get caught up in class. And that's a corrupting influence. I had 3 kids, and I understand that. Luckily, we lived in a very middle class situation that was good. Generosity is that you contribute money and time to other people. And this is just because we do depend on other people. We need to have enough leisure time and money to actually make good on that and create social bonds with people so that people develop trust and goodwill with each other, right? There's this whole fabric of culture that develops outside of the lodge, just in this generosity. Generosity is really important. And then greed is the extreme, and it's really harmful. Okay. And people do have to develop trust and goodwill. When people don't trust each other, then Aristotle says the laws simply become a bludgeon to prevent wicked people from harming each other. And that is not a political community at all. Political community is come together, you have laws, create a middle class, people have time to be engaged, they have time to relate for reasons other than money, they have time to be creative, make art, go to performances, intellectual curiosity, find out about science on their own. That's political community where we actually develop all of these higher order capacities that we have. Okay. Other virtues, magnanimity, when you're super rich and you give away. So right now we have a bunch of billionaires giving away money, right? And they're controlling a whole lot of stuff in how they give it away. In my country, there's the Koch brothers who are donating. They are oil and gas billionaires, and they're completely corrupting our political system. They're giving to every school board, every council to control the land use laws, to control the curricula, everything to brainwash people that capitalism is great. So I don't recommend this, all right? And then Bill Gates and these guys are trying to go to carbon zero. So there's this war between the billionaires, but I do think each of us has a role to play. And I don't think it's good for everyone to just obsess about stuff they can't control, right? You just find your place and then you perform, live the virtuous life, help other people do so, and you're a light in the darkness. And the Muslim tradition of zakat is a very good foundation again. And then you just have enlightened generosity, right? And it should be enlightened since it's religiously based. But that's very good. In the US, we used to have tax breaks if you give money, of course. It has to do with money. I wouldn't give money away unless I get money. Okay. But anyway, you have a better system, right? It's related to your religious tradition. Then there's rational ambition. You find out what you like to do and what you can do and what's meaningful to you and what you think is your best contribution to human well-being. It can be anything. It can be business, it can be teaching, it can be the arts. It's just the criteria is what is it that's I'm talented at, it's meaningful, and I can, it's helpful. Somebody else needs what I like to do when I'm living my best life. So you get the credentials, you find out what piece of paper do I have to get this job. You know, my society will say you need this piece of paper, that piece of paper, and then you get it, and then you do it, and always for the sake. It's justice is rule for the benefit of the rule. Okay, injustice is rule for the benefit of the ruler. Right, you take your power, money, and run. Honor. So honor is people go over and above what they need to do. They make extra efforts to create community, and you should honor that, right? Recognize what they're doing, contributes. Rational anger, everybody knows about this. You get too angry or not angry enough. If you should get angry and you don't, you hold a grudge. This is me, right? I don't know if you've ever, you know, there was a moment there when you really should have just said something and you didn't, but then you don't forget it. That's not good for your body chemistry either. Then there's sociability, you get along with people. People make mistakes and they'll say stupid things. But if you fixate it, if you insist, you know, then it's going to have so much animosity. There's so much we do, you just let it go. It's not good. All right, so those are the social virtues. Those are virtues in relation to people you know, you have contact with. Political virtues are the virtues in relation to people you don't know. And it's treating even people you know as citizens, not as friends or family. So then you don't, okay, let's see. Oh yeah, I was gonna say friendships are really big. So weaving together all these friendships based on utility, based on different virtues that you're exercising. You can study together and help each other in school. You can do volunteer work. The world's religious traditions were set up as social bonds, you know. I like the theology part of it, but most people really are spiritual because of the people they know or because of the arts. So the traditions always have great art, and it's sensuality leading to spirituality, right? It's always leading to this world beyond the sensuous world. Self-knowledge, you know what you know and don't know, and this is huge. I've been watching these, you know, professionals, experts talking about what's happening at this moment. Because as an American, you know, it's a big deal. But they think they know what they don't know. And once they become experts, they spend their lives only focusing on a part of things. And they become wise. Right? It's amazing. Like the more of an expert they are, the more blind they are, because they've had to achieve so high at this one thing. So the school I teach at doesn't have a lot of status, which means I get to think about whatever I want. And I get to put it all together. I don't have to get specialized. So I specialized in culture. But the political virtues, the first one is economic. The economic system needs to be regulated. But the virtue behind it is moderation, middle class. The second one is learning how to make good laws. I'll try to hurry. I'll try to go faster. The art of legislation, statecraft, is knowing what laws to make to keep together the richest, poor, and creative middle class. This is an art. It's not a science. You have to motivate people. You have to make a culture where people is incentivized And it's incentivized not just economically, like people are rewarded for getting along, you know, that's a good character trait. Then there's the distribution of goods. That's unequal. People need unequal amounts of education. They need unequal specialization, but all grade school kids, that's equal, but at a certain point. Some of these social goods are unequal, but when you're punishing wrongdoings, rectifying wrong, then everybody should be equal. You shouldn't be rich and be able to get a lawyer to get you off. Or being poor and you're accomplice you lose. So, and there are better and worse ways to do that. Rehabilitating prisoners so they go back out in the world and flourish is much better than just punishing them. And you know, sending them the world with no skills, not in the old neighborhood, no self-esteem. Of course, they're going to do the same thing. That's what we did. Applying the laws. The judges and the juries have to apply the laws because the laws are too general. And then enforcing the law, like the jail and prison system. You treat people like animals, or do you realize a lot of these people don't even know what it is to be nice? If you would be nice to them. There are people with philosophy in the prison, and they have students who have never experienced somebody just asking them, well, what did you think of reading this book? And just having people sit and talk like they've never done that. And so, you know, how can they function? But anyway, so I think, you know, it would be nice if police officers and prison wards given this ability to respect each other, to learn how to create different kinds of social bonds. Again, this is a religious value in all the religions. Then there's the intellectual virtue. This is math, science, engineering, technology, and it's rhetoric, it's learning arguments, learning how to write, learning how to speak. It's usually what we associate with school, right? Academic. And what Aristotle said is the intellectual virtues in our brain are taught in school, but they're not naturally connected to either virtue or vice, right? There's the moral virtues, those are related to character. You can be really smart and really wicked, right? And he tells, this is his map, and I like this a lot because it's true, right? You can be really smart and really wicked because the way our brain works and the way. So we have a lot of really smart, really wicked people in our society, right? Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, at least is problematic if their virtue is just being successful, just being smart. That's not virtue at all. And our country has gotten things really confused. I've read a book by Melinda Gates. I really like her philosophy and what she's doing. Mackenzie Scott, you know her, the divorced wife of Jeff Bezos. She's doing a whole lot of volunteer donations to things. But then there's Elon Musk, you know, all this stuff, right? And you talk about it, and so you should know that. That's very important to know. That college professors can teach all this stuff. They aren't going to make students better or worse morally. Then when you put it all together, you got all these virtues. You have to make a decision in a situation. If you are wise, you will recognize what you need to know to make a good decision. You will call in the experts who know what you need to know. You will call in experts who disagree. You'll sit around the table. You get all the possible views, and then you'll decide. Then you have to debate about, well, what's actually possible. We all wish for world peace. Okay, anybody doesn't want world peace here? And most of us decide, well, you know, what time am I going to go to bed? Right? I mean, our actual decisions are quite a long ways, but you should never forget the goal. Okay. Anyway, so you come together. Then you have to, the object of choice. You have to decide what's actually possible. Some people think things are possible that are not. They're impossible. Some people think things are not possible that are actually possible. So that's a matter of deliberation. And then you pick the one you think is best. You explain to each other, is there a consensus on this? And then you have to go and explain why. And then you have to go in front of everybody who's affected by it and convince them to do it, right? You have to inspire them. Now, if you look at all these virtues, right? Personal, social, intellectual, political, interpersonal, making a decision, motivational, right? That's a lot. And I can't do that, right? I can tell you where I'm worst, but it doesn't matter. It's huge. And that's the bludgeon that we use, the Western. We have wisdom and you don't. But the thing about setting the bar really high is that what went with that is the obligation of the nobility. You have to give back. And that's what Indonesia has in its University Community Engagement Project. Professors have to give back. So if you have this talent and you've had this opportunity, you give back. So on the one hand, it's unequal. And it says some people are smarter than others, better able at practical wisdom, but they give back, right? Whereas in the Enlightenment, it was, oh, everybody's free and equal, you can make money or not, and you don't have any obligation. Does everybody understand that? You have rights. It isn't necessarily the better way to go. It's the difference between the words and the actual what's going on. Okay, so the nobility, okay, and then I'll tie this to Pancasila, right? So Aristotle did have this belief in the unmoved mover. There's this force that order is prior to disorder in the evolution of the universe, the evolution of the biosphere, which means that there's patterns there that we can understand. Well, so chance and randomness is not a first principle. There's an ordering principle there that is behind all the things that we see. There's a principle of creativity, but in the midst of all those genetic mutations, which ones actually survive? The ones that already fit into what's already there, right? So there is this ordering principle. So that's why when I read consciousness, oh, that's Aristotle, because it's consistent with all the religions. And in addition to that, I think all the main leaders of the traditions exercise these virtues. And I teach a class, where I have Aristotle's virtues. Then we do Socrates, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, and the students are rolling their eyes after a while because this is so obvious. Okay, and yet, an undergrad can learn this. It's not rocket science. Why don't we teach it, right? For political reasons. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why college students don't have access to this very simple understanding where it would draw us all together. Where we disagree on interpretations and then we focus on the interpretation rather than the original drive. Okay, so to be a good Indonesian citizen, you should know Aristotle's virtues. Right? And then principle 2 is humanitarianism, and of course the Greek view of humanity. But it's not a materialistic, it's not a modern view. Modern humanism is different. And that's the humanism behind capitalism, socialism, and a lot of other stuff. But ancient humanism is spiritual. And so principle 2, humanitarianism, I think is Greek humanism. Unity in diversity, okay. The Greeks had 12 gods. Each one was passionate about something different: justice, beauty, truth, honor, respecting nature, leaving behind a better world. And they would get in these conflicts, right? Because each one of them had a good claim, but human beings aren't like gods. Human beings have to compromise. And so it was very much a pluralistic view. And he said a polis is not a unity, it's a pluralism. And then gaining wisdom through deliberation. That's just what I told you, right? Aristotle's view of practical wisdom is the art of deliberation. So when I read that, I went, wow, that's so Aristotelian. And then the social contract is much more like Aristotle. So Aristotle worried about greed. He thought he disagreed with socialism in the sense of no private property, but he thought there ought to be a very, very high inheritance tax so that rich people don't pass on their wealth to their children, because that'll just create an oligarchy. And he also statecraft is using laws to leave the rich and the poor together. So very much more engagement of the laws in economic life than the way we do capitalism, right? And so Aristotle is very much in between also. And then you work on a curriculum. In my country, the humanities disciplines have been where people do ask these questions about how to live, right? Theology, philosophy, literature, history. And they're in decline in the US, and our democracy is in decline in the US. They're being replaced by STEM. And, you know, STEM is big, but STEM is not going to save us. It's not like our salvation, you know, that's enlightenment wanted to say, take knowledge and develop a whole culture based on knowledge. And that's a failed experience, okay? I think wisdom has to guide knowledge. And then I also think you create a climate on a college campus, or if you have those big campuses, you try to create community, right, of learners like you have here. So you have bonds. People are creating bonds and friendships based on their education. And they have memories of, oh yeah, I heard that weird lady talk about Aristotle. Do you remember that? No, I'm not sure I remember that. Okay, so the Greeks had storytelling. And so I think most people learn these patterns through storytelling. They'll tell a story. And so I think, you know, what you can do is end up telling your favorite story about Muhammad, and then you can go, oh, that relates to the virtue of anger, right? If you think about it. And what I think as an Indonesian, you should what are the favorite stories about Confucius? What are the favorite or analects? Because I do that. I do the analects and the virtues, and then I pick parts of the Quran. But you would do a much better job of that. But if you just figure out which are the parts in the stories that everybody knows best, there's going to be a pattern. You know, you're going to be able to trace which of those virtues it is. I think those would be really interesting conversations. The other thing that the Greeks do is, instead of preaching at you like, don't be greedy, you know, they tell a story where they magnify that. Okay, let's fantasize about somebody who got his wish. He was greedy, he had a wish, the gods granted his wish, and look what happened, okay? Anybody know the story of King Midas? All right, he was greedy, and he asked the gods, or the gods said, okay, everything you touch will turn to gold. And he thought, oh, this is great. And then his daughter came and sat on his lap, right? And the thing about that is that if you are greedy, you're never home for your kids.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. So then those are the stories that stick, right? They stick in your head because we have this archetype. I do Jungian psychology about the collective unconscious, all right? And if we all got together and people that are, you know, Indonesians that are Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, they start telling all their stories and use Aristotle's virtues, I think you'd come up with the whole line, right? Does that make sense? But you can add some virtues. I mean, again, this is just my training, but other people can add. It's not the be all and end all. It's just the basic structure of how to set this up. So my scholarship is focused on the ancient, but they wanted wisdom and they wanted to pass it down. All of the ancient traditions, if they hear something else, they'll go, oh yeah, let's include that. They're very inclusive and they're very syncretic, right? If we're talking about the universe, you know, anybody can have part of it too. And so the way I tell the story is, so I would like to work with other scholars for obvious reasons, right? Learning these analogies. And then I tell the overall story is just the rise of the civilization, becoming aware of this pattern, and then how it got corrupted and it lost it, right? So, and I do this, I teach around the world. Well, where is your country in this trajectory, right? Some countries are moving up, my country is moving down, right? But at any one point, all the lessons are true, right? You're just that you have to contextualize them differently. So, all right. So I wish you the best of luck. And also in that other presentation I gave you, I did tell you about that I have an opportunity to work with Indonesian scholars in these journals that are Scopus journals. And so you can get them published, but you have to show me you know English and all this other stuff. No cheating. But anyway, so if anybody thinks they would like to do a paper where they're combining, you know, like the virtues of Islam and Pancasila, and I would bring in the Greeks and we have this paper, I would want you to be the primary author that does about 4/5 of the paper, you know, it's your paper, but I can bring in the Greek stuff and just show how the human condition is underneath there. And we're all so much more alike than different. That's what I really want to get through to people, because we've got a huge project in front of us of saving life on Earth, basically. And we're gonna have, you know, climate refugee problems, climate disruption problems. It's gonna be really hard. Your generation, my generation gave you a pile of, you know what, we knew all this 50 years ago, we did nothing. I remember saying to myself, if we don't do anything, this is what's gonna happen, and it's literally happening. According to my worst nightmares, we're gonna bomb anybody that disagrees with us, and it's not good. But you have to, you're gonna get it anyway, right? So if I can do anything to work with you to help you, you know, think of our common humanity, common problems, avoid letting politicians manipulate us and all that, interfaith dialogue, and who's being the realist and who's being the idealist. I really resent that. It's complete idealism if you can teach people to be greedy and then that's without any problem. That is totally pie in the sky, right? It's realism to say you have to teach people to want to be virtuous because there's so many ways things go wrong anyway. It's hard enough, but if people don't even want to try and they won't learn from their mistakes, like that, it's all over. So anyway, I have a YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's give applause to Professor. Thank you, Professor Marta, for your wonderful presentation.
It was long. I don't know how long it was.
There's a lot of things we must discuss. I know.
You can lean your back.
Oh, actually, I'm not too bad.
I look
Usually,
at you very tired. It's like
it's not too bad. I just can't try to be cautious.
Thank you once again, Professor Marta. This is a very important discussion and critical discussion in our democracy world. So I take a note from your presentation from Plato, Aristo to Sukarno that in our condition today, one of the basic condition we should take in our life is the first is the principle of spirituality. So this is really interesting from presentation from Marta. You never mentioned the word religion, but I heard you mention many times about the word virtus and spirituality. So I take note that principle of spirituality is very important in our democracy system. And the second one, the principle of humanity. This is very important. One last word you have mentioned that we have to save our earth and our generation. So this is very important that we should have principle in humanity. And the third principle is one we discussed Professor Marta's presentation is we have to unite, right, in our divided society. This is not an easy job for us, but at least we have to try how to manage our earth and how to save our generation. I know there's a lot of questions. I think we can open one or two questions. I know some of you want to pray Tarawih and some of you are going home. Oke. Pak Helmi silakan mau nanya Pak atau teman-teman yang lain komen. Pak Helmi would like to add and comment something before we end our discussion.
okay.
Silakan yang lain.
Turn it off.
Iya. Ya, oke. I think Pak Helmi,
Okay.
you can conclude and make a final comment. Ya. What should be conclusion? Oh, masih ada kalau saya ini sebenarnya ibu silakan. Saya nanya Pak. Ya,
Well, I can say that, oh, I could say one thing I didn't mention. But the word religion is a colonial word. You know that?
no.
Yeah, the colonizers invented that word in order to denigrate any tradition that wasn't Christian. So Christianity was tied to progress, modernity, technology, all the justification for taking your resources and running, right? And so they said that these more primitive cultures have religion, and that's anti-science. But that's socially constructed. The origin of those traditions, they are a way of life, and they were very intellectual. The intellectual leaders they belonged to what is called a religion. They were spiritual, and they were doctors. They were metaphysicians. They were business people. They were whole people, right? They did it all. So science was never separated from spirituality until the modern world defined it that way in order to justify and maintain colonialism. So I think you should know that,
Yeah,
right?
that's very important.
So I didn't. That's why I don't use the word. It's a colonial word.
That's colonial word. Thank you. That I quote from Syed Muhammad Nakib Alatos, the Malaysian scholar. Maybe you have heard. He's a great scholar in Malaysia on religion and modernity. So the concept of religion is not exactly confined as religion in our world today, but the word religion in Islam is ad-din, ad-din and al-Madinah, right? So din is a huge context, right? In the Quran and Sunnah too. So the word din is it could be religious context, could be humanity, could be civilization. Yeah, al-Madinah is to grow in the city, right? So we as people, have to grow in our modern world. Right? That's a modern concept of religion that is Islam. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'm coming here because I was interested in the topic written in invitation.
Oh, what was the topic?
Let me read it. Crisis and fragility of democracy in the world. Lesson learned from Plato, Aristo, Sukarno. Right? This is the topic. It is my pleasure that I listen from you that you criticize your country's democracy, right? Of the United States. And I think we have listened long time ago from Sukarno that he criticized both capitalism and socialism.
Yeah.
So that's why Sukarno has initiated to build non-aligned country, yeah?
Yeah.
What we say non-block
The
country.
third world country.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Non-block alliance. So I think it is not a new thing when you criticize capitalism of the United States. What I want to hear is that to propose a new enlightenment to us. Yeah, what is there any thought can change the capitalism of the United States, for example? Because to be honest, Indonesia partly has adopted United States capitalism in economy.
I've been driving through it.
All right, exactly, exactly. But when we talk about religion or religious people, yes, it is far. Yeah, I'm reminded of the thesis of Max Weber when he said that Christian ethic has influenced United or American economy. Is that true?
Protestant work ethic.
Is it until now? I don't know. Secondly, because the topic is mentioned that there is relationship between democracy taught by Plato, Aristo, Aristoteles, and Sukarno, let me bring all of you to the great era when Plato says that the best country should be led by the king who always be influenced by intellectual thought. That's right? Good. This is according to Plato. And according to me, Iran in this era has been implementing the Plato's idea. Iran. Let me tell you. Right? According, if we see Iran, there is, there are mullah who always think and think and think day by day.
Maybe you can explain who is mullah. Maybe
mullah is quote unquote holy people who are very clever among other people, who are very influential, who are, and this is what is different with Plato's theory. They are very religious to some extent. Yeah. Because according to Plato, let me remind you, because those intellectual, they are obliged to think every day, so they don't need to have family. Yeah, they don't have, because their duty only to think every day. So when they need sex, for example, yes, they are able to have any women to visit together, and then and after that, they let them go and then think again. What they think, and the kids, and the king and the queen should absorb what the intellectuals think about the country. And Iran now is adopting 100% what Plato says. So that's why there are the tradition of mullah who always think and think, and the president must be or must obey what mullah say regarding regulation, regarding economic, regarding war, regarding religious belief, and everything. This is Iran. Of course, this evening, I'm not proposing what Iran has been doing to be implemented in Indonesia. But no, we are thinking, what is the best for our country, Indonesia? That's my theory. Thank you.
thank you, Pak.
Well, I think the Greeks were very tolerant of a lot of different points of view, and Iran was not, right? So the notion that there's only one way is not the Greek. So Plato's philosophy of kings, actually, Socrates is his model of how to live. Socrates was a stone cutter, just like every other religious leader was not privileged, right? Muhammad was what, an orphan, Confucius was an orphan, and they were all very tolerant. So the theocracy of Iran is not Greek. I mean, you might like it or not like it, but it's not Greek, and it's not Panchasila. You have 12 million people that would revolt if you tried to do that, right? It's not Indonesia is not a one religion country.
Yes.
And so I don't think that's the spirit of Indonesia. It's definitely not the spirit of the Greeks. The Greeks usually get criticized for the opposite, right? that they put up with everything and they're relativists and all that. So the thing that Plato, I didn't mention Plato, but Plato lived in Athens when it was a great democracy, and they were open to free scientific thinking. The people who were speculating about the universe had different points of view, and that was fine, you know, and they ran their little communities on the islands, and that was fine. And then people took turns ruling and being ruled, and people were different, and it was pluralistic, and it was very open without being relativist, right? And it was spiritual, it wasn't material, it got corrupted. So it was an amazing city, really. Like they had the tragedies in at all a controlled society. Any society with censorship would never allow Plato's dialogues or Greek tragedy, because you have these characters who are the leaders, and the audience watches them and finds out, and they say stupid things and they say corrupt things. And so the audience is supposed to pay attention. And there's religious leaders that say stupid things and are corrupt, right? The people are supposed to be critical thinkers. They're not supposed to blindly believe anything. A religious leader, political leader, anybody. That's critical thinking, that you learn how you can assess whether a leader is manipulating you with rhetoric, and or whether they're really interested in your point of view, whether they accept complexity and ambiguity, whether they tolerate different points of view, whether people can disagree. So in these tragedies, it's amazing. People are arguing like crazy, and everybody has a really good argument. Like I can understand that. And yet, like this woman who stabs her husband to death, right? And he's the king, and it ruins the city. Well, yeah, she's bad. Well, then you hear the story from her point of view, right? Well, he killed our daughter and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you realize, geez, if I were in that situation, I could see myself doing that. So you understand, geez, I'm capable of real good or real evil. That's the humanism where you can identify. But because we're vulnerable and because we can go to extremes, we need to be reflective and we need to communicate. But we also need to never trust somebody blindly, because they will corrupt that. That will get corrupted. Even if the leader isn't corrupt, the followers will be corrupt, right? They will strong arm somebody, you know, you're not Islam enough, you know, according to me, and I think it's according to Khomeini. So it's whatever it is, you might like it, but it's not Pancasila and it's not Greek stuff. It's kind of funny because usually the Greeks get criticized for being materialist, right? But they're not. They're spiritual humanism, ancient humanism, but they're definitely not. They wouldn't want the city as any kind of unity where there's any opinions that aren't allowed in. Every opinion is allowed so that people can anticipate all the different kinds of evil opinions or even their own capacity, right? You have to really understand how complicated things are. And then you can figure out, oh, that person is like that, right? Or I'm kind of like that. Does that make sense?
Okay. Anything else? Yeah. You ask a question? Sampai jam 8.30 ya. Ayo, ada lagi komen. Komen silakan.
Silakan, ada rokok. Cookies food. One with the
what is it, banana, coconut, and ulang.
Mbak Suci, on Wednesday, lecture will be social and cultural communication. So some points already raised. So just,
Yeah, well, I could focus on language.
Yeah.
The power of language. Is that a subject? Yeah. Right.
Nah, kan ada lagi?
Nanti diajak kawan-kawan. Kita kan 9 ya, terus tambah lagi. 9 bisa masuk ya. Deden 4 masuk. Hari Rabu jam 8. Berkembang. Kita yang lain nanti ya, coba undang.
Prof, conclusion aja Prof. Conclusion aja Prof. Conclusion. Ya, silakan, Prof. One final conclusion from the host.
Yeah.
Oke. Ya. Jadi kesimpulannya kawan-kawan, ini menarik tadi bahwa ternyata menurut beliau Aristoteles itu sangat dekat dengan ide Pancasila. Ya. 5 sila ini itu semua bisa ditemukan di karya-karya Aristoteles. Jadi memang tentu tidak bicara tentang Tuhan secara khusus, tapi bahwa ada kekuatan besar ya, sana yang mengontrol alam, yang itu menjadi sangat penting. Dan kedua, aspek kemanusiaan, ya, bahwa kita harus selalu berbuat baik. Ya. Generosity, kita pemurah. Before I mentioned about the verse of the Quran, 77, actually the continuation of the believing in unseen, 6 elements, continues with 7 elements actually for human communication. Number 1 is generosity, the principle of giving. Number 2, to be patient. And compassion, yeah, because it's a sabiri bahasa. And then committing with the promises, commitment to the promise. Number 4 is control on motion. You also mentioned before. And number 5 is to forgive other mistakes. And number 6, not to do things that we know is bad. You don't repeat bad things that you know. Number 7 is to be excel in everything we are doing. We believe that God will witness what we are doing. So we are not worshiping God because God doesn't need to be worshipped. We need to be good, and then of course register with notice, and then we do it as if God is witnessing us, although we can see God. So this is important, and then the principle of unity, very important, and then of course consensus, musyawarah, mufakat, kerakyatan yang dipimpin oleh hikmah. And the last one is social justice. So according to her, it's very critical that these ideas not basically found as Italian words. So, but still, my question: can we see this as ideology? Well, people say that ideology needs to be explained, wider explanation, like, for example, Das Kapital or other works of capitalism. While Pancasila only 5 principles, this cannot be really taught unless we translated according to religious prescriptions, teachings from the Bible, Quran, Analytes, Veda, Tata, and Quran.
Actually, Aristotle's view is actually not even in ideology, it's in biology, right? This is a flourishing, this is how a certain species flourish. So it's more like a description of how a certain species functions. And Aristotle did believe that the soul is immortal, but it was part of the soul. Like I don't get to have my naturally curly hair.
Yes.
Okay. Right? You have to think of yourself as your mind, not as your body. So he doesn't accept biology. But so but I think the emphasis is on living your life with with the hope that you would pass on something, a world that's better or not worse to your children. Right? That's something you can know. And I think to me, that's a lot more important than worrying about going to heaven or not. Okay? I care about my children and I feel really bad that I'm passing on something to them that's awful and they're having to deal with it. And my grandchildren is going to be even worse. And we knew better, right? We didn't have to do that. Americans had the choice and they made the wrong choice. So I think the Greek, they, Socrates thought, but he doesn't know if there's an afterlife or not. But what matters is how you live. So he's not living for an external reward. He's not saying there isn't. He's just saying his motive is to live the life for life, right? The life we're intended to live. And then whether or not, wherever that leads is fine.
Well, thank you very much. So on Wednesday, 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock, Google will accompany on Wednesday, 8 o'clock in School of Graduate Studies. Please invite Mulis, Harvey, as well as colleagues. I in contact with the director of the school, and then he asked me to contact the assistant to the director. So hopefully, at least our class, we have class for my own class, and then we hope that we can get more students from other classes.
Maybe I'll talk about some of Plato's dialogue, because one of the main factors in the fall of democracy was rhetoric, was the use of manipulation to persuade people to do things, right? To manipulate, in other words, advertising, right? And so, that was a major, and it still is now, Fox News and all this stuff. It's a big problem.
Even more now because they can manipulate technology.
Right, that's right. But that, again, there's the direct analogy, I think, with Plato.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you.
this is very fruitful. And we invite you tomorrow to stay overnight here.
Yes.
Oh, that would be, you mean,
You have second
Tomorrow.
Thursday.
Wednesday. Tomorrow Tuesday.
Tomorrow, Tuesday, tomorrow.
I
You
know,
can
but I need to stay on Thursday. so-
Yes, Thursday. Yeah, Thursday.
Okay.
Hari Kamis aja, karena pulangnya.
Okay.
Yeah,
On
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah.